For chemically cleaning a panel, if it's an OEM part, we can go directly to a wax and grease remover. Once you've allowed it to soak there briefly, then it's removed by taking clean, dry towels, wiping it in one direction, rotating your towels frequently so that you're always using a clean surface, and continue to wipe until the part is dry. One direction so that you're more or less picking the contaminants off the surface and not just moving them back and forth on the part. Once an OEM part is cleaned, now we're assuming that it has an E-coat type primer on it. Once that part is cleaned, it still should be inspected to make sure that the primer is smooth and paintable, and then it should be mechanically scuffed or cleaned or sanded, however you want to word that. And that would entail scrubbing the edges thoroughly and then sanding the outside surface carefully with a relatively fine grit of paper, maybe a 320 or a 400 grit, maybe even a 500 grit paper. The E-coat should be sanded primarily just to remove any defects that would make it unpaintable. Even though an OEM part has primer on it from the factory, that primer is relatively thin. If you have sanded that part to remove defects, you're obviously taking some of that film off that part. The typical paint system is always going to start with a primer sealer to give us an additional coat of primer that will provide some additional corrosion resistance. It will improve the adhesion of the base coat. It will improve the adhesion to the original primer. It'll give us some additional film thickness too. A lot of people don't take that into consideration, but one of the primary causes of premature chipping are thin paint films, so it's always good practice to put a primer sealer down. When it comes to preparing aftermarket parts, we would recommend that you thoroughly wash them first, inspect the surface, and then we would do what's called a solvent rub. Take a urethane grade reducer or thinner, put some on a clean white towel, and rub the outer surface of that panel just to make sure that it's a hard, cured finish. If it solvent rubs and nothing comes off or doesn't soften the film, you're probably okay to go ahead and finish cleaning it, sanding it, and preparing it in the usual manner. If you do a solvent rub and the coating softens up, it really should be removed because you're dealing with some kind of, either it's an uncured film or it's an inferior type of paint coating that shouldn't be painted over. When you're working with salvage parts, it would be important again to clean the part thoroughly first. Wash it with soap and water, rinse it, dry it, inspect the surface. If at all possible, look for signs that the part has been previously repaired or painted. Again, we'd recommend that you do a solvent rub on it. Make sure that the coating was hard and cured. If you can't see that there is any paint peeling or flaking, it's probably a sound finish. Go ahead and finish your cleaning process. Wipe it down thoroughly with wax and grease remover. Sand the part thoroughly and prepare it for primer sealer just like you would a replacement OEM or aftermarket part. As a paint manufacturer, we hesitate to recommend painting over parts that have more than 10 mils of paint on the part. Not that you couldn't put another coat of paint over that or another system over that, but once that paint film becomes thick, it doesn't have as much chip resistance as it normally would have if it were the standard 4, 5, 6 mils thick. So if it does chip, the chips tend to be larger and more unsightly.